This is Fire in the Lake, sort of a supergroup type game. Mark Herman and Volko Runke worked together on this one. It's using Volko's coin system, and I picked this up for a few reasons. One, it was available for me on the fall sale. I've kind of been vaguely kicking myself about not picking up a distant plane. Let me talk a little bit about how I feel about coin, because a long time ago, not far from when it came out, I covered Andean Abyss. I was impressed enough with Labyrinth and Wilderness War that I wanted to give the game a shot, and I was very impressed with it. There's no question there. Since then, though, two things have kind of preyed on my mind about the system and have inhibited my being sort of an auto P500 on it, because I was really impressed with Andean Abyss as a game. I'm impressed with it as a simulation, and I have to say I feel the same about A Distant Plane, and I'm probably going to feel the same about this from what I can see of it from the rolls. But it didn't give me, none of them have given me a real feel like I'm running the campaign. I feel like I'm playing a game trying to optimize the points and preventing victory by worrying about them excessively. I feel like I'm playing the game too much. Some of it, I tried to think, well, is it because of the little wooden pieces? Is it too Euro-ish because of these? No, I think it's actually, and this is why I'm giving another one a shot, I think it's because of a lack of familiarity with the system. Now, I've played, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times, which is pretty heavy for me, but in terms of plays, but it is a very different system, and each game is very different in certain ways, in the sense that you have these Chinese menus which cover what each power can do. And these are very much tailored to represent the abilities of the powers within the framework of the game. In a lot of ways, I spend so much time zoning on these, trying to figure them out, that it's almost like a new system each time. What's strange is I walk away with a sameness feeling, even though it's almost like a new system each time, probably because I'm focusing so much on the what I'm doing, what am I trying to achieve side of it, that I feel almost like I'm playing an optimization Euro. And that's troubling, but I believe if I get kind of more comfortable with the series, I'll have a better impression of that. Maybe this one will be the breaking point for me for that. On the other hand, maybe this one won't, because I am again learning a new series. One of the problems is I played Andean Abyss, I think, once. And like I said, I really liked it. And I played that solo. I played A Distant Plane only opposed. I don't own it. And when I'm playing something opposed, I don't drink a game in quite the same way as I do solo. I'm not talking about the analysis. Probably being on camera too much is going to be too much analysis. So I might try to step away even more than I usually do from this. And then there was a second issue which I started to find playing ADP opposed. And it related to it corresponded to my circumstances with Andean Abyss, which is that these games seem to always come to the last coup card, and the order of that card becomes the deciding factor in the game. And that's something that actually really troubles me, and I don't feel like I'm going to answer that either way, because in that case, it's sort of a game issue. Now, is that a good or a bad thing? It's hard to tell, because what it means is that I'm playing very, very balanced games, but I think the balance of power situation in the game promotes that. So that if you reach a certain level of play, it's going to come down to that players are probably going to play defensively enough to keep anyone from getting an automatic victory. Okay. I do have some real worries about that. I've heard some people say, oh, no, and they've played more than I have. That's not the case. We often have that. But, I just don't believe that they don't have an imbalance in player capabilities there. I think the same kind of issue, though, if you could reach that level of competency, applies to games like Here I Stand and Virgin Queen, which also have automatic victory conditions and the possibility of going to the end. Maybe not to the end card, but where one hand or whatever, one set of luck really does determine the game among equal players. And that kind of makes sense. The thing is, most war games, and I think the Here I Stand Virgin Queen combination, actually are harder for the players to maintain that delicate balance completely. They might get out of whack more easily. And I feel like these games are maybe too easily subjected to that balance of power situation. That basically three players can look, see who's in the lead, and stop them. Or if two people are in the lead, the other two can pretty much screw with them enough, along with the two fighting with each other, that they will be able to prevent an automatic victory. And then it does come down, that last coup card, if everybody's kind of close, they all have a shot at winning. So it becomes who gets the right ordering, okay? And there are things you can tweak around with that in terms of, well, you can pass if you know that coup card's coming up. But, well, you don't know that coup card's coming up unless you're down to the last couple of cards, because of the way the deck is constructed. The decks are constructed by basically inserting, they're coup cards in this game, and the others, they're propaganda cards. The deck is constructed by inserting those cards into different segments of the deck and then stacking them on top of each other. So you know that in this game, there's one of these coup scoring cards every set of 13 cards in this deck. Now, well, that's some of the psychological reasons for me approaching this game. I'm not going to go into too in-depth an explanation of the rules here. I know other people have done that. I'm comfortable enough with the core rules of the coin system that I don't want to go into them. I'll breeze through them. What happens is you basically draw one of these cards. At the beginning of the game, one of these cards is face up, another one is in waiting. So you know what the next card is. That can help you plan a little in advance. Each player is sitting in here at the beginning of the game in eligible position. Basically, the cards look very much like this. And yeah, this is a pivotal. Okay, these are something special. But and they give an ordering of who gets the first option to go. Well, if you're sitting in here and you're the first marker here, you get the first option to choose your action. And you're basically able to choose one of these three picks. You can either do the event, you can do the operation plus a special activity, or you can do the operation without a special activity. And what you choose here determines what the second person, who may or may not be the second person in the card, but the second person who uses that card, if there is one, gets to choose. So if you choose first the op only, then the second person gets only a limited operation. If you choose to do the full boat of actions, the operation plus the special activity, they get the limited op, or they can take the event on. Okay, that's a little bit more flexibility. And finally, if you take the event, they can take a full op with a special activity like up here. Now, usually, because of the pattern, of two people being able to use a card, what you're going to see is one person picks something, and the next person in the card, let's say yellow picks something, and the next person in the card picks something else. We're not saying they're going to do these events, and they resolve the card. The other people are, SOL for that action, but the people who take actions drop into here. Okay. And then, when the next card comes up, we have new action possibilities. Well, in this case, blue and red, these guys, would have gotten the first choices anyway. But let's say this card came up instead, this patterning. We're not going to worry about the actualities of the cards. We'll talk about these a little later. So here, green would get the first choice. Well, they're in the ineligible faction, so they don't get an opportunity to use this card. Likewise, yellow doesn't. So now blue gets the first option on this card, which naturally they wouldn't. But, the pace of the game ends up such that usually you have 2 people in here and 2 people in here. And then at the end of the turn, after the people here have gone, these guys come back and these guys go in there, and then you have that same pairing. Now there's one little means of screwing with that, which is if you don't want to take an action, maybe because you're the second choice of action and you don't like what's being offered you. Let's say this guy does the no special activity. Your only option. I'm sorry, I had these kind of like this. It's not allowed. This would have been the appropriate. Your only choice of action is to take a limited operation, which may not be worth it. So you can just pass, and then you get a bonus of resources, depending on who you are. And you stay eligible, which means there might be more people in there for the next card. And if it ends up an advantageous card to you, you get a bonus out of that. You don't get any bonus if you didn't get a choice to go, though. So if, in this, the first and second player choose to go like this, these guys are, like I said before, shit out of luck. But if instead this goes and this guy passes, and then red could take this, and he would get his extra bonus out of that. It's just kind of a bonus for not taking advantage of the card when you had an option to do so. Other kind of neat stuff in it, you have different kinds of terrain. You have regular land terrain that look like areas. You have cities, which kind of look like areas, and they connect like that. But then you also have these lines of communication here, which sit between areas and also are areas in and of themselves. So you kind of have the ability to walk across these or to be on them. And you'll see how some of the operations work with regard to that. These I don't believe are lines of communication, though. I think those are just boundaries between areas with no road capability. I'm trying to see if there's a thingy here, a map key, and I do not see one. Because these might be national borders. That would make, yeah, these are national borders. So the lines of communication are these guys with little numbers on them. And they're considered areas. These are not actually lines of communication. Fair enough. Okay. You'll also have a number of different kinds of pieces, like in the other coin games. You're going to have troops, which are squares, and hey, there's something interesting here. 3 of the players have troops. Normally only the counterinsurgency player has troops. You're going to see that this is different. The North Vietnamese have troops in this as well. They have their own army. And their actions will show you how that kind of works. Moreover, the counterinsurgency forces have special operations units, which are very much like guerrillas. So things are getting kind of twisted. And I mentioned on the Game Box, which is my forum, and you should go there if you want to pay attention to my videos, because I think I'm done posting them elsewhere. They're nicely organized there. I still put them up on, Consim World and stuff, but I'm kind of done with BGG for a while at least. So yeah, you have this kind of different thing. Anyway, as I mentioned there, I was thinking, I know somebody's doing the American Revolution. I think it's possible to do the French Revolution in a coin series. You'd have 4 factions that I can think of, sort of the more radical revolutionaries, the Montagne, sounds cool, presumably, but sometimes there's a shifting, you wouldn't want to necessarily fix it to one of the party chambers, but a more federalist and feudalist faction, or the more moderate faction, as you'd look at, which again would be flexible because people moved from faction to faction within that period. Those would be two. You'd have the royalists, who are really an insurrection. So the government itself would be the revolutionaries. The royalists would be something of an insurrection, but they would have some troops. There's no question there. We'll see in this game that it handles troops. And you'd also have the interventionists, who are anti-government troops and almost purely troops. Now, as to the two factions that comprise the government, they wouldn't have troops of their own. They'd have revolutionaries who are trying to gain control of regions politically. However, there would be a government force pool. And whoever manages to control the government, which I think would only be one of the two revolutionary factions, would get to use the government troops to hunt down their enemies, both the Catholics and the other side of the revolutionary, conceivably, as well as they'd have to be able to cope with the interventionist troops. I can see that. See, one of the things about this series is that it's important that you have a four-power split. And do not worry, I have no intention of designing this. If the idea triggers some desire to use some of the idea, or, if it just sends you in some other totally different direction, that would be totally cool, because I'm not someone who has the fortitude to face design any longer. I probably never did. Okay, so let's look at what we have here. First of all, the playbook has a nice... You get a hell of a playbook in this one. Components-wise, man, GMT is just outdoing themselves. The game goes for a decent amount, there's no question. The cards, first of all, are the perfect kind. They've kind of settled on these. Stiffer than an earlier period, but not those really super stiff ones. They used to make a nice heavy board, the wooden pieces, la la la. Really heavy-duty counters. I looked at a World at War, and the counters are much thinner than my old A3R counters are. And the map's not as nice, and I'm kind of depressed about all that. But this thing's 50 pages, more than 50 pages. Of course, it looks like one of the pages was done by Grognads, if you're familiar with him from over at BGG. That this shows not only a list of all the cards, but the different factions that go and the years. Now, the card decks, there's two ways to play it, and I think ADP had this as well, where you could set up the decks so they're semi-historical, in the sense that events will only happen... The events are clustered by historical period, and you stack the deck according to period. There's basically 3 different decks in there, but there's also a big pile of missing cards. I don't know how much of that's really what if, and how much of it is just, hey, we had so many things to cover in, the Vietnam War. Some of them maybe weren't as important as others, and the deck is going to be, the ones that have the biggest influence on the game in this particular game. But it helps you mix up the game so you get different events, so you can't count on anything. Another thing that you all have is each player has one of these special pivotal event cards. Now, these are going to require something to happen before they can be triggered. So this one, play 2 or more cards in the RVN leader box and more NVA troops than US troops on the map. And then you're allowed to do an offensive. And the effect is, the event itself is probably a very powerful factor in favor of this player. This is used in that event. If you match the event, you can use it if you're in the eligible box to trump the card that's out there. In addition, this person is able to trump this one, I believe, because he's able to trump the pivotal US force. This one's able to trump any of them. This is the VC. And the Arvin is able to trump 2 players. Which means if the US trumps, then the NVA could trump that, and then Arvin could trump either of those 2. If the NVA passed on their trumping, for example, you trump the US. So you've got this opportunity to jump in with these events and trigger them when you wish, and they have powerful effects. Okay. Let's take a look at this. And we're not, like I said, we're not going to go through the rules completely. I wanted to give a little bit of the view of the game, but you guys all either know coin or can look at someone else's description of this particular one. So there's included in here, first of all, there's a playthrough in here, but there's also included the guide for the coin players, which tells kind of the differences of the different factions. And let's take a peek at some of these. So this one, the United States serves kind of like the coalition in ADP, and they're going to have events that kind of work like them. Let's take a look at what we have here. So we have training, which allows them to, and what's kind of funny about the rules is it's written not too differently from this. It's almost like a play aid. It's very hard to capture the game reading the rule book. Now, knowing coin already, it's easier, but man, the first time you face one of these, it's painful, and I would probably suggest a different one from this as a starter. So this is going to tell you in general what it's going to do, where you can do it, cities or provinces with any U.S. pieces in them. And then it's going to cost you 3 Arvin resources. Well, one of the interesting things about the U.S. is they don't, and ADP has this too, they don't use their own resources. These discs, these cylinders are for the resources. And you'll see the U.S. doesn't have one. Well, it has one, I think, in Andean Abyss. They're able to use the Arvin resources, but only up to the Arvin economic value. If they go, they can't go below that, because any resources below that are no longer foreign aid and such not. So in particular with this, what would it, let's go over here. So that only costs if you place Arvin units. Now, you can't place U.S. units, so I don't think. Actually, you can. You place them out of the available stuff. There's also unavailable units, which are here, which have to be brought in, I believe, through cards. Most U.S. units, though, are going to come in through the end of the coup phase procedure, and there's a whole sequence here that gets followed as to what happens here. And one of the things that happens is commitment, where you get any casualties coming back, but some of them end up out of play from that. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So let's see. Place 1 or 2 irregulars, or if U.S. base, 1 to 2 rangers, or 1 to 6 Arvin cubes. Now the rangers are the Arvin irregulars. These are the U.S. irregulars. You notice I'm not getting troops out of this. It's because the U.S. irregulars aren't just the Green Beret. They're the irregular forces supplementing some local counter-revolutionary militias, but that are not part of the Arvin. Then up to 1 coin-controlled train space, in up to 1, you can pay to pacify 1 or 2 levels, or if it's Saigon, up to 3 patronage to Arvin resources. One of the things you're going to be dealing with here is there's this patronage value, which is basically money that the Arvin is siphoning off of the foreign aid and the economy. And that's going to depress public support for the counterinsurgency. Likewise, though, there are things that the insurgents can do that will anger people, like the VC are able to tax as one of their actions. The U.S. has abilities to patrol, where they'll be basically running along the road nets and the cities. That's actually like the security operation from Nick Karp's Vietnam, which is a fantastic game, but we much more an operational war game than this. A sweep, you're allowed to move U.S. troops into a location, and then you're going to be able to activate the guerrillas there. Now, activating is like in the other games. It's going to flip them over, and then it makes them more vulnerable to certain actions. You'll see that, maybe. Certainly in the playthrough. Sweep, did we do that? Yeah. Assault, if you choose this action, that's going to allow you to, if you use ARVN forces, if you're going to use an ARVN assault as a follow-up action to your attack, basically ARVN troops in the area can do a mop-up operation after you hit, then you have to pay 3 ARVN resources. Anything the U.S. troops are doing, though, that's paid for out of the U.S. budget, which is just assumed to be pretty much unlimited here. If the U.S. has troops in there, they're going to support them fully, and they certainly did. And if they don't, well, then they're just using whatever money they give to ARVN if there's no U.S. troops. And here you're going to see one active enemy piece is removed for each U.S. troop cube. You get 2 for 1 if there's a U.S. base present, but only 1 for every 2 if you're in the highlands without a U.S. base. And now in one of these spaces you can pay to add the ARVN assault, which will be over here. And you just pay, and that causes you to trigger the ARVN troops to come in as a follow-up afterwards and kill more. Now the problem with this is you can only remove active enemy pieces. Well, troops are always active, but these guerrilla forces are only active when they're star up, and that's something, you know, that takes an effect here. And likewise with all the other games, if you're allowed the operation plus a special activity, you get to pick something from choice B here. And really the game is baked into these charts, the player aid charts, and what each of these activity options works out for the different players. So they'll work with a particular accompanied operation, and then here you can see, let's see if we got one. Advise is to strike with indigenous forces. 1 or 2 spaces not selected for training. So if you do patrol, you're fine, but if you do training, you have to pick other spaces. And you sweep in place or assault with ARVN, which doesn't cost anything. Or activate an underground ranger or irregular to remove 2 enemy pieces. And these systems always say you can't hit the bases till you've killed everything else, and if they're hidden guerrillas, you can't hit the bases until you activate the guerrillas and hit them, basically. There are some differences in some of the abilities here, though, that you'll see are kind of interesting. There was something else I wanted to go into. Okay. Well, anyway, let's take a look at some of the things here. You got special abilities for airlift and airstrikes to move troops more quickly. This is actually very similar to what a distant plane has, but the U.S. is more committed to this war than we have been to modern wars in terms of really throwing in a significant amount of troops. Yeah. Okay. We certainly did in Iraq, but this was a very, very heavy commitment for a long time. Now, Vietnam is kind of interesting here. Again, similar to a distant plains Afghan government. Here they're trying to siphon money off of out of the U.S. aid, but elsewhere as well. And that's one of their victory conditions. And their abilities, let's see if they have something that allows them. They have govern, which allows them to add 3 times the population to aid. If there's more ARVN cubes than U.S. cubes, they can transfer 1 times the population from aid to patronage, but it shifts the area towards neutral. So they're kind of siphoning money out of you know, what's available for the war effort and padding their own victory conditions with that. And that's kind of neat. The North Vietnamese are kind of interesting as well. They have their own special troop counters, and they have abilities which kind of match that. So one of the things that, outside of just being sort of a regular insurgency force, one of the things they do is they kind of replace the VC forces with their own using the infiltrate, where they're going to be placing NVA troops up to the Trail Plus bases, and if desired, they can replace NVA guerrillas with troops. If the NVA is greater than the number of VC, the opposition goes one level towards neutral. They can have these things. This is, you know, lukewarm support. The other side is active support. That's for the government. And then over here, we have opposition to the government at various levels. And that can be degraded by this. Now, what you'll see is that infiltrate requires NVA bases or NVA greater than VC. And then you can replace a VC, even a tunnel, with NVA. And that's kind of impressive because you could take over one of these bases. And you sort of, your ally, again, kind of like the ARVN is able to screw with the US, right? Your ally is going to be getting shafted because you're converting his forces over to your side. Now, the U.S. also has its own shafting, which is that they kind of don't want to have U.S. troops committed to Vietnam. And they get victory points off of having troops available to be committed. And I may have this the backwards way. See, I see this low equal activated pieces. I think that's this side, but I don't know. I have to reset those and pay more attention there. You also have heavy artillery commitment for the NVA, and that's going to be used kind of like airstrikes, except you have to either be present or adjacent, and you need, I think, 3 troops to do it. Now, troops are kind of problematic because the coin forces can knock them out a lot more easily than they can the insurgents, but these are also more powerful in terms of what damage they can do, both from the bombardment, but also, I believe, from the assault or attack that they have. So you'll see remove 1 enemy per 2 NVA troops, or activate all NVA guerrillas to roll, equal or less to their number, removes 2 enemy. Remove 1 attacker per US troop and US base removed. Whenever you attack the US, whenever you do damage to the US with that particular action, you end up taking heavy casualties on your own, which is kind of painful. Sorry, casualties go here, yeah. U.S. casualties only. Okay. You have the terror action, which is going to allow you, let me see, it shifts support by 1 level towards neutral. And on lines of control, it provides sabotage. But terror has another effect, which is over here. Don't remember quite what it does. If you're sabotaging the roads, it reduces the total value, but it has other effects on things. We'll have to look into that. See if govern. Yeah. I don't remember quite what it is. And, you know, that's the thing. I read the rules, and it all feels like I'm reading a player aid, and I'm just going to catch it as I play. We can take a look at terror in here and see how it's affected. Insurgent operation places marker in the same name in a province or sabotage or 3.34, but we don't really get the effect of it. We just find out what it how it's done. And that's how the whole rule book's written. You know, the only way you can learn this is by playing it, even if you kind of know it. And I've seen Terror in the other game, and I don't remember how it works. It affects support and opposition, 1.6, okay? So now we got to look this up, right? If the space... Yeah, it doesn't tell you what it does here. You got to find it elsewhere. And... no, that just tells me what it is. It's really a hard rule book to cope with, and all of the series has been. Okay. Pay 1 resource per province or city. Yeah. Activate 1 friendly underground. Well, maybe terror takes effect in the coup, which is what I remember from the game. But again, you know, the rules don't tell you what something's, you know, what the effect of doing things is. It just tells you what you just did. And that makes it very hard to approach the game. It's like Axis Empires, the Totaler Krieg, and Dicenso, in that you read the rules, you got no idea what's going on. You play the game, and after a little bit, you get kind of an idea as you do things. And this is all the non-player bot rules. So let's see, maybe the coup phase tells me what's going on here. Yeah, I don't see terror in here. You know, resource phase, sabotage has an effect. Seem to remember terror had an effect. Maybe there's some... Here's the picture. That's where I just was, though, wasn't it? It affects support and opposition. Well, that's what I read. It hinders future efforts to influence it. Well, does that say anything here? Like governing doesn't help. How do you increase support? Maybe here it tells me how I increase support, because this is what's really hard about the game is, okay, support spaces population favoring Saigon. Yeah, this gives me back to 1.6. It doesn't tell me anything about how I get support, does it? Yeah. So I don't know, you know. Here, how about support phase? Maybe that says. Yeah, so this is in the coup round. So the way support phase works, the U.S. and the ARVN may spend ARVN resources to build support up to 4 provinces and or cities. Every 3 ARVN resources removes a terror marker, or if no terror is in the space, shifts the space 1 towards active support to a maximum of 2 levels per space during the support phase. The U.S. may not spend resources below the marked total econ, just like with other things. Then the VC is going to be allowed to encourage opposition where there's no coin control and there are VC pieces in up to 4 spaces. Every resource they spend removes a terror marker, or once no terror is in the space, shifts the space 1 towards active. So what the terror does is it provides a speed bump as far as I can see, right? Is it once or, yeah. So it'll cost 3 extra ARVN resources to get rid of that terror. And that's about the only effect that I see there. And, you know, honestly, trying to cope with the rulebook and the menu is probably what ends up spoiling the narrative of the game for me. I had the same damn effect with the Axis Empire stuff. You know, I felt like there'd be an interesting game here if I could figure out what was going on. Well, I've played these and have figured out what's going on, but you have to relearn all that stuff, and the rule book is not the source for that. It's this and playing. That's the only way that I can learn this thing. Now, maybe if I read the little play guide, you know, here, play this game out for me You know, you'll learn. But that's not how I like to learn rules. So yes, the rule books, I forgot how much of a pain in the ass they are. So it's a good thing I'm not explaining the damn rules, right? And with that, I think I am going to take a quick look to see what there is here. The VC are able to tax. That's going to move the population towards the coin side of things. And like I said, I am not the person to be looking at for the rules. So I'll put this here. This trail thing, this is there's something similar to this in terms of, I think, Taliban support in Pakistan or something in ADP. If you go too far in either direction, it's going to move you down. Now the trail is going to help the NVA in its infiltration, which we can see here. All right. So up to trail plus bases. So, you know, you can only bring troops in equivalent to that. And I don't know if they have other effects that are based on that. Something like rally allows you to bring more troops on the board or to convert troops to bases. That's all very similar mechanisms to the other games. Anyway, not the best take for an intro for it. There's no question of that. I'm not intending on, giving the rules here. But I did give some of the opinions that are bringing me to the game. So I think it is an introduction. I don't know quite what to call it if I load it up to BGG ever, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm sure it'll just get called an instructional because I won't remember what I did for this if I do ever go back to loading videos up there.